Hey everyone, Chelsea here. In this video I'm going to show you a very basic example of how to do sgraffito, which is a technique used to actually scrape or carve underglaze from your pot or piece. I'm actually just going to use a small circle here of clay that was prepared earlier. This piece of clay hasn't gone through the kiln yet, so this was actually just cut from a rolled slab of clay, and I let it dry just for about an hour. Now this is because it's quite warm in here today. It's dried quite quickly. It depends on the humidity in the room. Different factors will alter how quickly your clay will dry to be at a good stage to do this method. But just keep an eye on it. And when it's to a dryness where it's holding its shape, this is a good time to do the sgraffito and put your paint on. If your clay is still too damp, it will take a long time for the paint to dry because there will be moisture underneath the paint. So all I'm doing, I'm just putting a layer straight onto the top of the clay. When you're doing this, if you find that the paintbrush is picking up the colour of the clay and dragging it across the clay and kind of mixing it with the paint and muddying it up, your clay's not dry enough, so just give it a little bit longer. But this is fine, so I'm just doing broad strokes, just real quick, just one coat there. And this is how thickly I've applied the paint. Like I say, it's drying quite quickly, so what I'll do is I'll actually let it dry completely between layers, and then apply 3 layers of the underglaze to your pot. Now this is dry already, so I'm just going to go back in and add a second layer. This process is really good for adding detail, for adding a bit of colour to your pot, and just a bit of texture as well, because when you carve the bit of clay out, you're altering the texture on the top of the piece. So again, that's my second layer, and it's drying very quickly, so I'll just let that dry for a sec. So these would be really good for coasters. You could make this smaller and actually cut different shapes and make brooches. I'll show you some examples. I just want an excuse to slide around the room in my chair because it's fun, I'm sorry. So these are some pieces that I've done before. These have already been through the kiln. They've had clear glaze on them as well, but before they went in the kiln, I had just painted the surface of this little trinket dish and then carved out a face. I kind of like the way you see the texture as well. When the light catches it, you can see the texture of where I've carved out the paint, because it takes a tiny bit of the clay out as well. So you don't want to do this on a clay that's too thin, because you know, if you go too far in with your tool, it can go right through to the bottom, and you want to avoid doing that, obviously. And this is another example. This is a terracotta pot, and he was made, I just let him dry a little bit, and then I painted him, and then I've used tools to scratch off the paint to make him look a bit older and give it a bit of texture. It can just really go a long way from making a very simple, basic pot looking really cute and interesting. It gives you a bit more to look at. Already this is dry again, so I'm just going to paint the third and final layer on. It can be, I use quite a broad brush for these, considering the size of the piece of clay, just to get a more even finish, but you can really just use any paintbrush to do this. Just try and apply it as evenly as possible. So you don't need to go out and buy a special paintbrush, is what I'm saying. Okay, so I'm just going to rinse that paintbrush off real quick. It's surprising how quickly it dries, which is very convenient. So tool-wise, what you can use for this, you can use anything you can find in your house that has a sharp edge, really. I've used the side of a fork before, just sort of using one of the prongs on a fork. You can use kitchen utensils, can be great. Just have a look in your kitchen drawer and you'll likely find something, or even your junk drawer. There's normally something that you can use to scrape off the surface of this paint, just so that you can see. What you're trying to do is actually take a layer of paint off so you can see the clay underneath, and you get that nice contrast between the colour of the paint and the clay. I think this looks particularly nice on the red clay and the terracottas, because you get a nice contrast between the two. If this was on like a light clay, it might not look as good because you wouldn't have that contrast between the colour of the clay and the paint, depending on what colour paint you use. So now that this is dry, I'm just actually gonna, I haven't thought about what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna go ahead and carve a face onto this. And all I'm doing is with this tool, using the corner of this tool to actually carve out a slither of the paint and clay. Depending on how deep you go in with the tool will sort of change the thickness of the line, so you can get a nice calligraphy sort of effect if you're manipulating how deep the tool is going into the clay as you're doing a line. This takes practice, but it's worth practicing because it can look pretty cool. And I'm just literally just slowly using that corner of the tool to take pieces of the clay out. And it's better to do smaller lines, and then you can actually remove the clay from your tool, just get it out of the way so you keep getting crisp lines. So I'm just kind of making this up as I go along to show you the process. You want to try and avoid touching the top of your paint whilst you're doing this, because you don't want to get fingerprints all over, because I'm holding the side of the clay here. I'm getting a little bit of red on my fingers and I don't want to put that onto the top of the paint. So just be careful when you're actually moving the piece around and holding it steady. You can really do this with any design that you want. I'm literally just carving a little face into this guy. This is a great thing for kids to do as well, because they can literally just, it's like they're drawing straight onto the top of the clay. Just maybe encourage them, again, not to touch the surface of the paint too much with their fingers, because it will mark the top and it'll just make it look a little bit dirty. Okay, so this is what I have so far. A very simple, kind of folky face. I'm just sort of looking at this for inspiration, this little guy that I made. But yeah, so I've carved out using the corner of the ribbon tool there, just the basic of the features on the face. Now what I'm going to do now is actually use a needle tool, making sure that there's no old clay on there. And I'm going to use the needle tool just because this will give a finer line and it gives you different texture as well. So I'm going to put some freckles across the nose. This is going to be like a little moon face. I'm just making this up as I go along. So we're going to turn this guy into like a little moon. So we'll give him some craters over here. Just going to add some texture around the outside. This is a quick and simple way, like I say, to add a lot of character to your piece. And this doesn't have to be a flat surface. You can do this, like I say, on the side of a pot as well, just to give some texture, definition. It really can add a lot to a pot. And so this is what I've just done quickly. This is very quick and just off the top of my head, but we have a little moon face here. And it's just showing you can see the carved lines. It gives it texture. Kind of love this. This is my little moon face. And this method is called Sgraffito. How cute. Oh, I'm stoked. I mean, I'm saying it's the moon. It's kind of like it could be a self-portrait almost. That'd be a cool project for kids as well, to do little self-portraits. You can actually pierce a hole through this. You can make tree decorations. You could use this on their door to decorate their door. I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. But enjoy. We'll look forward to seeing what you guys create. Thanks so much for your time. Bye.